guys, so today we're going to be doing CRUD operation. So basically I'll teach you how to make an API in GraphQL to perform to create user, update user details, get user and delete the user. So this is going to be a multi-part series. In this one I want to show you how to make the API and how to link it to Lambda. Okay, so let's begin. I hope you're logged into your account. I have already, and then you can go to AWS AppPsync, look it up here. Okay, create an API. We're going to be doing GraphQL API. Keep it as it is, designed from scratch. Okay, demo CRUD API. I will create it later. I'll be showing you how to do it later. That's it. You can create the API. Okay, now we are in the main part. 1 second. Okay, so now we have to create a schema. Schema is basically what your API looks like and what the person who's calling the API should send his input as, or what details he wants to get from the DynamoDB table. So API is, this is basically where you configure your input and output. Let's just load this. I don't think it's loading. Yeah, this should be the default. Okay, so let's delete everything. Okay, to begin the schema, you have to define schema query mutation Okay, so that's our schema. So basically all queries that come through will call the query class in the schema, and similarly for mutation. So now let's define type type query, and within this you can give all your queries. So query is basically if you want to get some data from your database, or you want to get something, you don't want to change or update a value, you just want to get the value. So that's when you call a query. So let's say query get user, and for now we're gonna leave it as that. I will get back to that soon. Now type mutation. So this is what you call when you need to update something, create something, or you basically want to change a value in your database. So that is a mutation. So there are 3 mutations: update user, create user, and delete user. Now they're not turning purple. I'll get back to that. First we got to define all these things. Okay, now what is it that we want to send in when we're getting the user? How do we know which user to get, right? So we need to provide an input. So input will be of type get user input, and it is required. This exclamation mark means it is required for this input to be present, otherwise the API will not get called. Okay, now what is get user input? So it's basically another type of data which needs to be passed. So we have to create a custom type get user input, and user email, and it is going to be a string value, correct? So exclamation mark means it's required. This user email value has to be there, or else the API will not get called. Okay, anyways. Okay, so now user email is compulsory to get for it to be part of get user input, and that is only then we can call the get user, and this is going to return a type of AWS JSON. So you set it to AWS JSON if you don't know what the return type is going to be. So this is a very good way to keep, this is like a default return type. Always remember to save your schema. Correct your schema errors. Okay, we have a lot of errors, we're going to get to it. Next, type mutation, type update user. Okay, now if I want to update a user, what are some things that I'm going to require? Update user, I'm going to require his email, so that is to know who I'm going to update, right? So string. Okay, then what are some parameters I want to update? Let's say our user has a first name value, and it's going to be a string. It is not, I'm not, notice how I'm not using the exclamation mark because it's not compulsory. Same thing applies for last name. It's going to be a string as well. Okay, so that is update user, and update user has an input of update user input, and it's compulsory, and this should be update user input, and this should be of type input. I'm very sorry. So if you want to pass in a value, this has to be type input, not type. Okay, yeah, so that is one. Next thing, create user. Okay, and then this is going to return AWS JSON because we don't know what it's going to be. The same thing now for create user. I'm going to do it right now. Hey, so I'm just done with all of them. So update user will be this one. We have to compulsorily pass in the user email and the first name or option, sorry, and you can update any of these values, but for now I'm going to keep it compulsory because it's going to make my code easier. Next, create user. So when you want to create a user, you want to have his email for sure, compulsorily email. First name is optional, last name is optional, but for now I'm going to keep it compulsory. Okay, delete user, we just need his email ID, so I can delete the item related to his email ID, everything related to his email ID, and it is compulsory. That's how I do it. Exclamation mark. Okay, so that's about it. Let's go save it now. Okay, so now the schema is done for the API, but when we call this API, where is it gonna go, right? So we have to set up the program, as to say, which is going to handle the calls which are made by this API. So let's go to AWS Lambda for that. So this is AWS Lambda. Go ahead and create a function, demo CRUD, CRUD Lambda. You can keep everything as it is, create the function. Okay, so the Lambda function has been created, and now we have this interface. So if you scroll down here, this is where your code is going to be. So handler is basically your main function, and that's the thing that's going to run when this is first called. Okay, so for now, let's just test if now how do we connect this API to this Lambda function. So for that, come over to the right side of the screen. You're going to have something called resolvers. So whenever an API is called, it's going to attach, you can attach a resolver. So basically a resolver is the Lambda function that you're going to call. In our case, it's a Lambda function. It can also be a Dynamo table. So we are going to attach this demo CRUD Lambda function to all of these APIs. We're going to handle all of this data in that Lambda function. So we have to attach the resolver. We are going to be doing unit resolver, VTL, velocity template language, data source. So we have to create a data source first. So basically we have to define the Lambda function, demo CRUD Lambda data source. My naming conventions are very bad. I'm not a very imaginative person. It's a AWS Lambda function. You have to be specific about the region you're in. You should not select something else. Demo CRUD API, that's the one. We'll create a new role, create. Okay, done. Now coming back to the schema, we can attach that data source now. VTL, attach that data source, create. You don't have to change anything else. Now a pro tip is to change this to just context. So that way we can configure which API is being called. Because if only arguments are going to be passed, we are not going to know, let me tell you, we are not going to know which of this is being called, right? So how do you know which of this is being called? It does not show up in the arguments list. It shows up in something called info.type. I'm not too sure, but I will show you as we go on later in the video. Okay, so you have to do this for all of them, basically all of them. So I'll just do it 1 second. Okay, I just finished that. I just connected the resolver to all of these fields. Okay, now we can go to, okay, now let's call this API, let's see what happens. You can go to queries. This is where you can test your APIs. Okay, so select query, my query, get user. Okay, I want to get the user dummy at gmail.com. Let's run it. Okay, now we did get a response from Lambda. It says hello from Lambda. So where is that coming from? Here it is, hello from Lambda. There you go. You connected your GraphQL API successfully to a Lambda function. Okay, so that is it for this video. So basically, let's to recap. You created an AppPsync API. You performed, you created query and mutation methods, and you connected it to Lambda. And now when you can test your queries, or you can test your API by coming to this query tab, and we did get a response from the Lambda. So in the next video, I'm going to be showing you how to create users, and maybe if time permits, some more actions. Okay, anyways, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content.